It's a very good argument for your rationality theory, isn't it?
Yeah.
That one that people are, that it isn't an addictive drug in the sense that people are saying, oh, well, I've just got to have this much. It's as if people are saying, oh, I think I'm smoking a bit much,
Yeah.
I'll lay off a bit now.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
all that sort of stuff. Or go have a holiday,
Yeah.
or have a year, as I've known some people say, oh, I'm having a year off, or something like that.
It was interesting, actually. It's a good point, Ronnie. In the study, in that questionnaire, and I'll include that on the discs, the questionnaire, there was a set of diagrams that looked at level of use, patterns of use, whether it was going up, which would be classic dependence one, continuing to increase, whether it was intermittent, whether it was stable, fluctuated, whatever. And I think from memory, the proportion whose level of use through time just kept going up and up and up was quite low. It was about 10% or something like that, which is kind of consistent, I think, with the clinical data, isn't it? I think around about 10% of a given population will be dependent on cannabis. Now we move on to personhood. We'll probably run out of time, but we'll see how we go. And this is just, this again exemplifies how different people have different ideas. Like, are you a cannabis user? Well, yeah, I use cannabis, but I'm not. It's not me. It's not all of who I am. These first two here, and then the third one, the young woman, she'd just been using for about a year, and she just I just love it. It's great, Now, the classic scenario for use is the age of first use, and then 2 years after age of first use, you're into your period of heaviest use, between a year and 2 years. And that period of heaviest use typically lasts around about 2 years, and it was the same in this sample, in the Amsterdam sample and the San Francisco sample. They all had the same patterns of use. So, first year, then by the end of the first year, moving into the second year, you sort of get going to a period of heavy use. That lasts a couple of years and then it tails off. But that's not everybody, but that's a sort of pattern. That if someone says, right, when were you using the most? Oh, it was around about here, then. So this person's sort of going into that period now, and she's having pretty positive experiences with it, and she's using it. But again, the different ways in which people define themselves in relation to cannabis.
It's interesting with your dominant discourse idea, Geoff, that we were just saying before, some of these things seem very unlikely that a drug user would seek out all this information and do all this research and be so thoughtful about their use. And then here you have a large sample of, extremely enthusiastic heavy drug users. And here, every single one of them, this is the pattern of behavior for a heavy cannabis user, to be intelligent and thoughtful about their use.
I think, many of them were. There were a few that I would say had problems. But there was one or two and I thought, ooh, like that young scaffolder guy. I did think, and I did say to him, well, look, mate, if you feel it's a difficult situation ethically. I'm not a clinician, so I can't say, oh, mate, look, I'm going to hook you up with these guys and they're going to, it's not my place to do that. On the other hand, of course, you do feel for someone when you look at them and you think, probably you're not really doing yourself a lot of favours by using the way you're using. Yeah, but a lot of the people in the sample probably would fit those criteria. Of course, it was a self-selected sample, so we've got all the issues around bias and stuff like that. John?
Yeah, what you were saying about thoughtful and all that, something I heard about was in the 19th century there was a club in Paris called the Hashish Club. There's something to hashish it.
Yeah.
And it was actually frequented by the great minds of the time.
Yeah.
The authors, the painters, all these great thinkers, and they were all in there smoking it like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah.
So to put in that thing in there that, it's just some sort of mindless thing, I think. That's a stereotypical attitude.
Well, it is, and again, that reflects a certain discourse.
In a time when there was no law against it.
Well, no.
It was commonly used by the great thought thinkers of the time.
Yeah, there were a number of them. Yeah, French writers and so on in particular. Yeah. And they'd also had some thoughts about spotting. Spotting is with the hot knives. If anybody doesn't know what spotting is, you heat the knives up over the burner or whatever, or the thing, and there are some people who say it's a really sort of dirty, disgusting habit, and it's akin to intravenous drug use, and there are others that say, like it's because you're using implements, you see. Because of course, we'll get onto it in a minute, time permitting, there's this notion of naturalness, cannabis is natural. Whereas using knives and heating it up, and that's a dirty, bloody habit that is gone. And there are other people, and that's what these guys said, we're a spot-free house now, they said. And they all went, yay, And then there were other people, like I saw the painter, who was quite happy to spot, he'd get the knives on, that was what he liked to do. And there was another guy who had a bottle with a gauze over it, and he called it the spottle, you see, and he had it all worked out totally, and he would heat the cannabis up just enough so it didn't combust. So not only did he not use much, which is I think another reason why other people are like, oh, they're so tight, they're only using a tiny amount, but he would heat it up, it wouldn't combust, he'd just get the vapour from it, and he had a gauze which acted as a filter. And so he said, look, it's actually the least harmful way to use it, and it's very economic, and you get really stoned. He said, you can't go wrong, basically. So that was, the spotting was one with one view or another view. It was quite an interesting one. Yeah. Well, it's quite an intimate experience, isn't it? It's an intimate experience, isn't it? Would you like to try my cooking?
Yes, that's right. It's sort of in that area, isn't it? I don't eat curry,
Yeah, well, just try a little bit.
Try a bit.
Next thing independent. I've got to have curry. But no, that's a good point. In the sample here, I think it was something like a majority of the people were actually used it. The first time they used it was with their friends. So I mean, realistically, like if you look at New Zealand, where it's so easy to grow, you'd have to say that it's here to stay. I really can't see that New Zealand would ever be without cannabis anymore. You just couldn't see it. And when you look at some of the comments that these people are making, and some of the ones we're going to see soon, you'd have to say, well, and I'm sure Abe would be prepared. I can't strike up, I shouldn't get it in your mouth, but I suspect he'd probably be in agreement that why would you stop smoking cannabis and start drinking alcohol? Because there are a lot of reasons that cannabis users would say would be actually quite reasonable for their continued use of cannabis as opposed to alcohol.